Cowboy dreamed of a quiet bride, but she was wild and kept him riding till sunrise. John had always lived a life that most people would call simple, but to him, it was perfect. He had grown up on the plains where the wind whispered through the tall grass and the sun painted the horizon with colors that changed every day. His mornings started early, often before the rooster crowed, when the world was still wrapped in a quiet calm. The smell of fresh earth, damp grass, and warm hay filled his senses as he saddled his horse and walked to the cattle. For John, there was no greater feeling than riding under the open sky, hearing the distant calls of birds and feeling the horse beneath him as it moved with strength and rhythm. John had a routine, and he liked it that way. Life on the ranch could be hard, but it was honest. There were long hours, sometimes from sunrise to sunset, but he found comfort in the predictability of it all. He knew every fence line, every ridge, every hidden water stream. He knew which cows needed extra care, which horses were skittish, and which corners of the land held the sweetest grass. He liked knowing he could manage it all on his own. He liked the quiet, the calm, and the certainty that came with it. But even though John loved his life, he had dreams beyond the work. He dreamed of a home, a small cabin tucked near the edge of the fields, with a porch that faced the sunrise. He imagined mornings with a warm cup of coffee in his hands, listening to the soft chatter of birds as the day began. And most of all, he dreamed of a partner who would share this calm with him, a wife who would be gentle, who would laugh softly, and who would enjoy quiet evenings by the fireplace. He had imagined her many times in his mind, a kind, gentle woman who understood the rhythm of his life and fit perfectly into the world he had built. That was why the day he met Sarah felt like something out of a story. It was the county fair, a place filled with music, laughter, and the smell of sweet pies and roasted corn. John had gone with a few friends, mostly to watch the livestock competition, but also to take a small break from his daily work. He remembered walking past the booths, the sun warm on his back, when he first saw her. She was standing near a small pond, feeding ducks with crumbs of bread, her laughter ringing clear when one of the ducks waddled clumsily toward her. She wasn't quiet like the delicate, shy woman he had imagined, but there was something about her presence that caught his attention immediately. Sarah's eyes met his for a brief moment, and he felt a strange flutter in his chest. She smiled, and it was the kind of smile that seemed to shine from within, a smile that could lift the weight of a long, hard day. John felt nervous, unsure if he should approach her, but something told him he should. He walked over, adjusting the brim of his hat and trying to appear calm, though his heart raced. "Hi," he said simply. "Feeding the ducks?" She looked at him, her smile widening. "Yes," she said, tossing another crumb to the nearest duck. "They're hungry little things. I can't resist helping them." Her voice was soft but confident, and John felt himself relaxing. They began to talk. At first it was small talk, about the fair, the weather, and the animals. But soon, their conversation moved into deeper territory. They talked about their lives, their dreams, and the things that made them happy. John found himself captivated by her energy, her kindness, and the sparkle in her eyes. She listened to him, truly listened, and he realized that this was someone who would understand his world, who would see the beauty in it the way he did. As the day passed, John and Sarah wandered through the fair together. They rode the Ferris wheel, feeling the wind rush past them as they climbed higher and higher, laughing at the tiny ants of people below. They watched a local band play, tapping their feet to the rhythm of the music, and shared a sweet slice of pie, each bite making them laugh when a crumb fell and the other tried to catch it. John noticed how natural it felt to be around her, how easy it was to talk and laugh. For the first time in his life, he felt that maybe his quiet dream wasn't too simple after all. It was a real possibility. By the time the sun began to set, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, John felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt in years. They sat on a wooden bench near the fairgrounds, watching the last of the day's light fade into the horizon. Sarah leaned slightly toward him, her elbow brushing his, and he felt a warmth spread through him. He realized that this was the kind of connection he had been dreaming of, not the quiet, predictable partner he had imagined exactly, but someone who could bring joy, laughter, and even a little unpredictability into his life while still fitting perfectly into his world. John walked Sarah home that evening, each step filled with anticipation. He felt a strange mixture of calm and excitement. He was still the cowboy who loved routine and quiet, but he also felt the pull of something new, something wild and unpredictable that he couldn't ignore. He realized that meeting her had changed something inside him. For the first time, he understood that his dream might not look exactly as he had imagined, but that didn't mean it wasn't real. As he rode back to his ranch that night, the stars twinkling above him and the cool wind brushing his face, John couldn't stop thinking about Sarah. He imagined more days with her by his side, days filled with laughter, gentle mornings, and quiet nights. He imagined a life where the peace he loved could coexist with the spark of someone else's energy. For John, it was a revelation. Life could be simple, yes, but it could also be full of unexpected joys. And perhaps, he thought with a small, contented smile, that was exactly what he had been missing all along. John didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to find out. For the first time in his life, he felt that the dream he had cherished wasn't just a solitary hope. It was becoming a shared reality. And as he closed his eyes that night, the soft sounds of the plains around him, he felt a happiness that was quiet, deep, and steady. The kind of happiness that didn't need to shout. The kind of happiness that could grow quietly, steadily, with someone like Sarah by his side. After the fair, John found himself thinking about Sarah more and more each day. Her laughter, the sparkle in her eyes, and the way she moved through the world with such confidence and energy stayed in his mind. He had always imagined a quiet life with a gentle, calm partner, someone who would sit beside him on the porch and watch the sun rise without saying much. But Sarah was different. She wasn't quiet in the way he had imagined a bride would be. She was lively, bold, and full of surprises. And although part of him was nervous about her wildness, another part felt drawn to it, as if it added color and excitement to the steady rhythm of his life. Their courtship began in small, careful steps. John invited Sarah to the ranch, hoping to show her the world he loved so much. He rode out with her across the fields, pointing out the grazing cattle and the hidden streams where the water ran clear and cold. Sarah listened carefully, her eyes wide with curiosity. She asked questions about everything: the horses, the fences, the work involved in keeping the land running smoothly. John was used to being alone with his work, but sharing it with her felt different. It felt good. Her energy was infectious, and even though he liked calm, he couldn't help but smile and laugh more in her presence than he had in a long time. One day, John decided to teach Sarah how to ride one of the horses. He chose a gentle mare named Daisy, knowing she was calm and patient. Sarah climbed onto the saddle with a mixture of determination and excitement, her cheeks flushed with anticipation. At first, she was careful, holding the reins tightly and listening closely to John's instructions. But soon, she started leaning into the ride, moving with the horse, laughing as the wind whipped her hair. John watched her, a mixture of pride and surprise in his chest. She wasn't quiet or timid like he had imagined a bride would be. She was fearless. And in that fearlessness, John saw something he hadn't expected: the freedom of a spirit unafraid to live fully. Over the next few weeks, Sarah's energy became more evident in other ways. She challenged John to races across the fields, encouraging him to ride faster and push the horses to their limits. At first, John was hesitant. He had never been a man of reckless thrills. He liked to feel in control, to measure his steps carefully. But when Sarah laughed, wild and free, and rode ahead with confidence, he couldn't resist. He found himself galloping after her, the wind roaring in his ears, feeling alive in a way he hadn't felt in years. Each time he caught up, they both laughed breathlessly, sharing moments that were exhilarating and joyous. Even in simple moments, Sarah brought a spark of adventure. She would drag John into spontaneous picnics in the meadow, insisting they climb the small hill near the edge of the property to watch the sunset. She suggested they explore the woods nearby, looking for hidden trails and secret clearings where deer sometimes grazed. She taught him to fish in the small pond behind his barn, laughing when he struggled to untangle his line or when a fish leapt out of the water unexpectedly. Every day with her seemed unpredictable, yet it was never unpleasant. John found that he began to look forward to the surprises, the small adventures, and even the chaos she brought into his otherwise orderly life. John began to notice that Sarah had a way of seeing the world differently than he did. Where he saw calm and routine, she saw opportunity for fun and excitement. Where he planned, she improvised. And rather than feeling frustrated, he started to appreciate it. He realized that life could be richer when shared with someone who challenged his way of thinking, who encouraged him to step outside his comfort zone. Her wildness wasn't a threat to his dreams. It was an invitation to expand them. One evening after a long day of riding and exploring, John and Sarah sat by the fire in his small cabin. The sky outside was dark, filled with stars, and the night was quiet except for the crackling of the flames. Sarah leaned back smiling, her eyes reflecting the firelight. "You know," she said softly, "life is too short to always play it safe. Sometimes you just have to run, ride, or leap without thinking too much." John looked at her, realizing that she wasn't reckless, she was free. And for the first time, he began to see that freedom wasn't something dangerous. It was something beautiful, something he wanted to embrace alongside her. Their friendship deepened into a bond that felt unshakable. They talked for hours about dreams, hopes, and fears. Sarah confided that she had always loved adventure, even when it scared her. She had grown up moving from town to town, learning to adapt, to laugh at life's unpredictability, and to find joy in every situation. John realized that her wildness was not just playfulness. It was a part of her survival, a part of who she was. And rather than trying to change her, he found himself wanting to join her in that way of life. Despite the differences, there were moments when their lives aligned perfectly. On quiet mornings, they would sit together outside, drinking coffee and watching the mist rise from the fields. Sarah would rest her head on John's shoulder, and he would feel a sense of peace he had never known before. It was in these moments that he understood that her wild spirit did not clash with his desire for calm. It complemented it. They balanced each other, like two sides of the same coin. But not every moment was easy. John sometimes struggled to keep up with Sarah's energy. There were times when he was tired from a long day of work and she would want to ride through the fields or explore a new trail. At first he felt frustrated and worried that he couldn't give her what she wanted. But then he would watch her laugh, hear the joy in her voice, and he realized that the happiness she brought him was worth every exhausted muscle and every long day. Slowly, he began to learn that life with her would be different from what he had imagined. But different didn't mean worse. It meant full, alive, and real. One weekend, they attended a local rodeo together. John had always enjoyed rodeos quietly, watching the horses and cattle with admiration. But Sarah dragged him into the action, encouraging him to try the games and even participate in a few simple competitions. At first he was nervous, afraid he would embarrass himself. But Sarah held his hand, laughed with him, and reminded him that it wasn't about winning, it was about enjoying the moment. By the end of the day, John was smiling from ear to ear, exhilarated by the experiences he never thought he would try. Through these adventures, John began to notice a change in himself. He was more willing to take risks, more open to new experiences, and more comfortable embracing the unknown. Sarah's wildness had become a part of his life in the best way possible. He started to see that the quiet, simple life he had always imagined was not a limitation. It was a foundation. And with Sarah by his side, that foundation could hold the excitement, unpredictability, and joy she brought into his world. As weeks turned into months, John's feelings for Sarah grew stronger. He loved her laughter, her energy, and the way she made every day feel like an adventure. But more than that, he loved the way she had helped him see the world differently. He realized that he no longer wanted a quiet, predictable life. He wanted a life filled with love, laughter, and even a little chaos, the kind of life that Sarah offered. John began to understand that loving someone like Sarah meant embracing both calm and wildness, quiet and excitement, and for the first time he felt ready for that kind of love. He knew that their relationship would not be without challenges, but he also knew that it would be full of moments that made life richer, brighter, and more meaningful. He had always dreamed of a bride, but now he understood that the right bride didn't have to fit a simple picture. She could be wild, full of life, and still be the perfect partner he had been searching for. By the time the sun set one evening, painting the fields in shades of gold and red, John felt a quiet satisfaction in his heart. He had discovered that life could be bigger than he had imagined, that love could be deeper than he had hoped, and that joy could be found in unexpected places. And as he watched Sarah laughing at something she had spotted in the distance, he realized that the best adventures were not the ones he planned. They were the ones that arrived when he least expected them. John knew that his journey with Sarah was only beginning. He did not know what the future would hold, but he felt certain of one thing. With her energy, laughter, and spirit by his side, life would never be dull. And that, he realized with a smile, was exactly the kind of life he wanted. The months passed quickly, and John could hardly believe how much his life had changed. What had started as a quiet longing for a simple, calm life had transformed into a whirlwind of laughter, adventure, and excitement. And at the center of it all was Sarah, his wild-spirited partner who had a way of making every day feel alive. Though he had once dreamed of a quiet bride who would sit beside him in silence, he now understood that her energy was a gift. She pushed him to explore the world in ways he had never imagined, to laugh louder, and to see joy in places he would have overlooked before. The wedding day arrived with the kind of morning that only seemed to happen on special occasions. The sun rose gently, painting the fields in soft hues of gold and pink. Birds chirped in celebration, and the wind carried the faint scent of wild flowers from the nearby meadows. John woke before dawn, feeling a mixture of excitement, nerves, and deep contentment. Today he would marry the woman who had changed his life, the woman who had taught him that love could be both comforting and exhilarating. As John prepared, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered their first meeting at the county fair, the laughter they had shared on the Ferris wheel, the long rides across the plains, and the small adventures that had gradually become a part of his everyday life. He remembered the way Sarah had challenged him, encouraged him, and sometimes scared him with her energy. And he realized that each of those moments had strengthened their bond. He loved her not in spite of her wildness, but because of it. Sarah, meanwhile, was preparing in her own way, full of excitement and a hint of mischief. She moved through her room with energy, checking the small details of her dress, making sure nothing was out of place, though she already knew she didn't need perfection. She had always loved adventure and spontaneity, and today would be no different. She imagined the wedding not as a quiet, formal event, but as a celebration of life, laughter, and love. Her heart raced with anticipation, but it was a joyful, thrilling kind of nervousness that made her smile uncontrollably. The ceremony was held near the edge of the plains, where a small wooden arch had been decorated with flowers and ribbons. Friends and family gathered, their voices soft with warmth and excitement. John stood at the altar, his hands slightly trembling, and waited for Sarah. When she appeared, walking down the aisle with confidence and grace, John's breath caught. She looked radiant, her eyes sparkling with happiness and mischief, her laughter light and infectious even in the stillness of the moment. As they exchanged vows, John felt an overwhelming sense of peace. But he also felt a thrill of excitement, knowing that Sarah would never allow life to be predictable or dull. Her presence promised adventure, joy, and love that was never ordinary. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, the crowd cheered, and John and Sarah shared their first kiss as a married couple. It was a kiss filled with promise, with laughter, and with the knowledge that their journey together would be anything but ordinary. After the ceremony, they mounted their horses to leave the wedding grounds. It was meant to be a quiet ride back to the ranch, a simple tradition that John had envisioned in his mind for years. But Sarah had other plans. She nudged her horse forward, urging John to follow her at a faster pace. "Come on," she called, her voice filled with excitement. "The day isn't over yet." John hesitated for a moment, feeling the familiar tug between caution and thrill. But he smiled, knowing that resisting Sarah's energy was impossible. And why would he want to? He spurred his horse forward, following her across the fields as the wind rushed past him. The sun had begun to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the feeling of freedom was intoxicating. They raced side by side, their laughter carrying across the open plains, and John realized that this was exactly where he was meant to be.
Sarah led him through hidden trails, over small hills, and across shallow streams.
Her energy was boundless, and she urged him to push harder, to ride faster, to let go of the careful, measured approach he had once clung to. At first, John worried he might not keep up, but as he adjusted to her rhythm, he discovered a joy he hadn't known existed. The thrill of the ride, the sound of their laughter, and the freedom of the open land created a moment of pure exhilaration. John felt alive in a way that went beyond anything he had imagined, and he realized that love with Sarah was not about stillness or calm. It was about experiencing life fully, together.
They rode until the sun finally disappeared behind the distant hills, leaving the sky glowing with the soft colors of twilight.
By then, both of them were breathless, their hearts pounding and their faces flushed with excitement. They finally slowed their horses, letting them graze as they caught their breath. Sarah leaned back, resting her head against John's shoulder, her hair tangled from the ride, her eyes sparkling. "See," she said softly, "life is better when you let it surprise you." John smiled, feeling a mixture of awe and deep contentment. He realized that every day with her would be full of moments like this, unexpected, thrilling, and unforgettable. That night, as they returned to the ranch, John reflected on the day. He had always dreamed of a quiet wedding, a calm ride home, and a peaceful evening together. But now he understood that Sarah's wildness didn't disrupt his dreams, it enhanced them. She had taken the foundation of his calm, simple life and built upon it with laughter, adventure, and joy. He felt grateful for her energy, her courage, and her fearless approach to life. The following days were filled with the quiet moments that John cherished, but they were now interwoven with Sarah's wild spirit. They spent mornings tending to the ranch together, afternoons exploring nearby trails, and evenings under the stars, sharing stories and laughter. John learned to balance his love for routine with her desire for adventure. He began to see that life could be both calm and exciting, steady and unpredictable, and in that balance he found a happiness deeper than anything he had imagined. One afternoon, Sarah surprised John by suggesting they take a longer ride than usual, venturing to a part of the plains he rarely visited. She led him through winding paths, across gentle streams, and over hills that offered breathtaking views of the land below. John had hesitated at first, unsure if he could manage such a long ride, but Sarah's encouragement gave him confidence. By the time they reached the highest hill, the sun was low in the sky, casting long shadows and bathing the world in golden light. They sat on their horses, looking out over the endless fields, and John felt a sense of peace and exhilaration that he would carry with him forever. As they rode back to the ranch, John realized something important. Sarah had not only changed his life, but she had also changed the way he saw himself. He had always been a man of routine, careful and measured in all things, but with her, he learned to take risks, to embrace uncertainty, and to find joy in the unexpected. He understood that love was not about controlling life or keeping it predictable. It was about sharing it fully, with all its surprises and challenges. That night, as they sat by the fire in their cabin, John reached for Sarah's hand. She squeezed it gently, smiling at him with that familiar spark in her eyes. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for showing me that life can be so much more than I ever imagined." Sarah laughed softly, her head leaning against his shoulder. "Ho ho 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 ho, we're just getting started," she said. "The best adventures are still ahead." John smiled, knowing she was right. Their wedding day had not been quiet, and their ride home had been wild, but it had been perfect. It had been a promise of the life they would build together, a life full of laughter, love, and endless adventure. And so, John and Sarah began the next chapter of their lives, embracing the blend of calm and wildness that defined their relationship. John had dreamed of a quiet bride, but what he found was far better. A partner who challenged him, inspired him, and made every day a journey worth living. Together they discovered that love was not about fitting into a picture-perfect plan. It was about creating a life that was vibrant, unpredictable, and unforgettable. Life after the wedding was nothing like John had imagined, and yet it was better than anything he had ever dreamed. He had pictured quiet mornings, calm afternoons, and peaceful evenings, with a gentle partner by his side. But Sarah's wild, joyful energy quickly filled every corner of his world, turning each day into an adventure. John had learned by now that resisting her was impossible, and honestly, he didn't want to. Each day brought laughter, surprises, and challenges that made him feel alive in ways he never had before. Their mornings began early, as they always had on the ranch. But with Sarah, early never meant boring. She would burst into the cabin with a bright smile, shaking him awake with energy that made him laugh even as he protested. "Come on, sleepyhead," she would say, tugging at his sleeve. "The sun isn't going to wait for us." At first, John had been tempted to resist, to stay in bed and enjoy the calm, quiet morning he had always loved. But her excitement was contagious. Soon he was out the door, saddling horses and riding across the fields before breakfast, laughing as Sarah raced ahead with a fearless grin. The ranch itself became a playground for their shared adventures. Chores that had once felt routine now became opportunities for teamwork and fun. They repaired fences together, sometimes turning it into a friendly competition to see who could hammer posts the fastest. They tended to the cattle, with Sarah learning quickly which animals were skittish and which were calm, and John marveling at her instinctive way of reading the land. Even simple tasks like filling the water troughs or feeding the horses became moments of connection, laughter, and shared purpose. Sarah had a way of bringing spontaneity into every aspect of life. One afternoon, she convinced John to explore a nearby canyon that he had avoided because the path looked steep and dangerous. "Trust me," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "It will be worth it." John hesitated, measuring the risks, but something in her voice made him smile and nod. Together, they navigated the narrow trails, climbed over rocks, and discovered a hidden waterfall that tumbled into a crystal-clear pool. They spent the rest of the afternoon wading in the water, throwing stones and laughing at the sheer joy of finding a secret place that seemed theirs alone. John realized that Sarah's love of adventure didn't take away from life, it enriched it. Evenings were equally lively. While John had once imagined sitting quietly by the fire, now they often found themselves cooking together, experimenting with new recipes, and laughing when things didn't go exactly as planned. Sometimes they would ride into town for a social event, and Sarah's energy would draw people in, making friends wherever she went. John had once been shy around large groups, preferring the calm of the ranch, but with Sarah by his side, he felt confident, welcomed, and more alive. Her presence pushed him to embrace life fully, to engage with the world rather than observe it from a distance. But life with Sarah wasn't only about excitement. There were moments of exhaustion and challenge, especially when John worked long hours on the ranch, and Sarah still wanted to ride, explore, or try something new. At first, he worried he wouldn't be able to keep up, or that he might fail to meet her expectations. But Sarah never criticized or pressured him. Instead, she encouraged him gently, reminding him that life was meant to be shared, not measured or compared. Over time, John learned to pace himself, to find joy in her energy without losing his own sense of balance. Their bond grew stronger with every shared experience. They learned to communicate, to anticipate each other's needs, and to appreciate the unique qualities that made them a perfect match. John loved Sarah's boldness, her laughter, and her fearless spirit. And Sarah admired John's steadiness, his patience, and his quiet strength. Together, they created a rhythm that combined adventure with stability, laughter with reflection, and excitement with peace. One memorable day, Sarah suggested they spend an entire afternoon riding across the plains without a destination, letting the horses guide them wherever they wished. John hesitated, concerned about time and practicality, but Sarah's enthusiasm was impossible to resist. They set out, allowing the horses to follow their instincts, and soon found themselves in a valley they had never explored before. They discovered wildflowers, hidden streams, and deer grazing peacefully in the distance. Sarah laughed, twirling in the saddle, and John felt a deep sense of happiness that he had never known before. The world felt endless, beautiful, and full of possibilities. Even mundane tasks became adventures. Sarah loved to turn chores into games, challenging John to see who could complete a task more creatively or efficiently. They competed to see who could gather eggs the fastest, who could clean the barn more thoroughly, and even who could corral the cattle in the most skillful way. John found that he enjoyed the challenges, laughing along with her, and that their playful competitions brought them closer together. It wasn't just about work, it was about sharing life, finding joy in the everyday, and building memories that would last forever. Nights were filled with quiet reflection, even amidst the energy of their days. After long rides and adventures, they would sit by the fire in their cabin, talking about the world, their dreams, and their future. Sarah loved to recount stories of her childhood adventures, her travels, and the small moments that had shaped her wild spirit. John shared his own stories of growing up on the plains, the lessons he had learned from the land, and the quiet joys of life on the ranch. Together they built a tapestry of shared experiences, a bond that was both deep and unbreakable. John began to notice changes within himself. He was more confident, more willing to take risks, and more open to experiences he had once avoided. He found joy in the unexpected, laughter in the mundane, and love in every shared moment. Sarah's wild spirit had not only enriched his life, it had transformed him. He realized that the calm, simple life he had once dreamed of was no longer enough on its own. Life with Sarah was bigger, fuller, and infinitely more rewarding. One evening, after a particularly long day of riding, exploring, and helping neighbors with tasks around the ranch, John and Sarah sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange, pink, and purple, and the air was filled with the soft sounds of crickets and distant cattle. Sarah leaned against him, her head resting on his shoulder, and John felt a profound sense of peace. Their days were full, sometimes exhausting, but they were also filled with love, laughter, and connection. He understood now that life was not meant to be predictable. It was meant to be shared, experienced, and embraced in all its fullness. Sarah's wildness continued to surprise him in small ways. She would waken for impromptu rides at dawn, suggest trips to nearby towns on short notice, or challenge him to try new skills like archery or fishing in unusual spots. At first, John had worried that he couldn't keep up, but he had learned to accept the unpredictability, to let go of control, and to find joy in the shared adventure. Each surprise brought them closer together, strengthened their trust, and deepened their love. Despite the constant activity, John found balance in the rhythm of their life. He still appreciated quiet moments, the gentle mornings with coffee on the porch, and the calm of the plains under the rising sun. But now, those moments were enriched by Sarah's laughter, her stories, and her adventurous spirit. Together, they created a life that was both steady and exhilarating, a life where calm and chaos coexisted in harmony. Over time, John realized that he had learned one of life's greatest lessons. Love is not about shaping someone to fit your dreams. It is about embracing their unique spirit, finding joy in the differences, and building a shared life that is richer than either could have imagined alone. Sarah's wildness had not disrupted his life. It had expanded it. She had shown him that true happiness comes not from control or predictability, but from connection, trust, and the courage to embrace the unknown. Their days continued to flow with a mixture of routine and adventure. They rode horses through the plains, explored hidden trails, helped neighbors, attended local events, and created traditions of their own. John learned to laugh more freely, to take risks, and to appreciate the beauty of life as it unfolded. Sarah, in turn, learned to value the quiet moments, to slow down when needed, and to savor the steady comfort of John's love. Together, they built a partnership that was dynamic, supportive, and unbreakable. By the end of the first year of their marriage, John reflected on how much his life had changed. The quiet, predictable life he had once dreamed of had transformed into something extraordinary. He had a partner who challenged him, inspired him, and brought joy into every day. He had learned to balance calm with adventure, routine with excitement, and stability with spontaneity. And he had discovered that life shared with someone like Sarah was richer, fuller, and infinitely more rewarding than anything he could have imagined on his own. John often thought back to the first time he met Sarah at the county fair. He remembered how her laughter had caught his attention, how her boldness had intrigued him, and how her spirit had drawn him into a new way of seeing the world. At the time, he had worried that her wildness would clash with his desire for calm. Now he knew that it was precisely her energy, her fearlessness, and her joy that had made life worth living. She had taught him that love is not about fitting a dream. It is about creating a life that is alive, vibrant, and shared fully with someone who challenges and completes you. And so John and Sarah continued their days together, embracing the rhythm of life on the plains with laughter, adventure. Each sunrise brought new possibilities, each sunset a quiet satisfaction, and every moment in between was a chance to grow closer, learn from each other, and discover the beauty of life shared fully. John had once dreamed of a quiet bride, but what he found was far better. A partner who kept him riding until sunrise, who made every day unforgettable, and who taught him that the best life is the one lived together wild and free. Life with Sarah had taught John more than he had ever imagined. He had started as a quiet, cautious cowboy, dreaming of a calm, predictable life with a gentle, quiet bride. But over time, Sarah's wild energy, fearless spirit, and love for adventure had transformed his world. He had learned to ride faster, laugh louder, and embrace moments of unpredictability. And yet, amid all the excitement, he discovered that love could also bring a deep, steady calm, a foundation that made the adventures even sweeter. By now, John and Sarah had grown into a rhythm together, a life full of laughter, challenges, and profound happiness. One morning, as the sun rose over the plains, John woke to the familiar sound of Sarah's laughter. She was already outside, singing softly as she tended to the horses. The wind carried the faint scent of fresh grass and wild flowers, and the air was crisp and golden with the first light of day. John stretched, smiling to himself. Even after all this time, Sarah's energy could lift his spirits before he had even left the cabin. He put on his boots, pulled on his hat, and walked outside to join her, feeling that quiet happiness and restless excitement mix in his chest. Sarah turned as he approached, her eyes sparkling. "Morning," she called, waving enthusiastically. "I thought we could ride to the old ridge today. The view is amazing at sunrise." John laughed, knowing better than to resist. He loved the quiet mornings, yes, but he loved Sarah even more, and following her into adventure had become a joy he couldn't ignore. "Lead the way," he said, mounting his horse with a smile. "I'll follow wherever you go." The ride to the ridge was invigorating. Sarah's laughter carried on the wind as they navigated the trails, the horses' hooves beating a steady rhythm on the soft earth. John felt a sense of freedom he had never known in his quiet, solitary routines. He realized that life with Sarah was not about surrendering control. It was about sharing it, trusting one another, and finding joy in the unexpected. The ridge they reached overlooked the plains, stretching endlessly in every direction, bathed in the golden glow of the morning sun. John paused, taking in the beauty of the land and the moment, and felt a deep sense of gratitude for the life they were building together. As they rode back to the ranch, John reflected on the journey that had brought them here. He remembered the first time he had met Sarah, feeding ducks at the county fair. She had seemed lively and daring then, and she was the same now. But she had also become his partner, someone who balanced his calm with her energy, someone who taught him that life could be bigger, brighter, and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. He realized that the quiet life he had once dreamed of was only a part of what he wanted. With Sarah, the best life was a mix of calm and adventure, routine and spontaneity, laughter and stillness. Their days continued in a joyful rhythm. Mornings often began with rides across the plains, tending to cattle, or exploring nearby trails. Afternoons could include helping neighbors, experimenting with new skills like fishing, archery, or even small carpentry projects. Sarah had a way of making every activity exciting, finding fun and challenge in tasks that had once seemed mundane. John found himself looking forward to each day, no matter what it brought. Life was never predictable, but it was always fulfilling. Evenings were for reflection, storytelling, and connection. After long rides, they would sit by the fire in the cabin, talking about the world, their dreams, and their memories. Sarah loved to share stories from her childhood, her adventures before meeting John, and the small moments that had shaped her courage and zest for life. John shared his own experiences of growing up on the plains, the lessons he had learned from the land, and the quiet joys of living close to nature. These moments deepened their understanding of each other, strengthened their bond, and created a sense of intimacy that neither had experienced before. One particularly memorable evening, Sarah suggested they ride to the top of a hill to watch the sunset. The ride was long and steep, but she encouraged John with her usual mix of excitement and gentle teasing. "Come on," she said, nudging her horse forward. "The view will make it worth every step." John smiled, letting go of his caution, and followed her. At the top, they dismounted and sat on a large rock, watching the sky turn brilliant shades of pink, orange, and purple. The land stretched endlessly before them, and John felt a sense of peace, exhilaration, and gratitude all at once. He realized that moments like this, shared with Sarah, were the true treasures of life. John also learned to appreciate Sarah's wildness as more than just fun. It was a lesson in resilience, courage, and trust. She had taught him to take risks, to embrace uncertainty, and to find joy in the unexpected. He began to approach life differently, balancing his careful nature with her adventurous spirit. He discovered that life was richer when he allowed himself to be open, to laugh freely, and to follow the path of love and curiosity that Sarah always led him down. Their relationship was not without challenges, of course. There were times when John felt tired from a long day of ranch work, and Sarah wanted to ride or explore. There were times when her energy seemed overwhelming, and he wondered if he could keep up. But each time, Sarah's gentle encouragement, her laughter, and her trust reminded him that love was not about keeping pace perfectly. It was about sharing the journey. Over time, John learned to balance his strength with hers, to rest when needed, and to embrace the excitement that came from living fully. As the years passed, John and Sarah's life together became a tapestry of memories, laughter, and adventure. They built traditions of their own: sunrise rides, picnics in hidden valleys, evenings spent by the fire recounting stories, and spontaneous trips to nearby towns and festivals. Their love was not a static, quiet thing. It was dynamic, alive, and evolving. John realized that the life he had imagined alone was small compared to the vibrant shared life he now lived with Sarah. John also discovered that Sarah's wildness brought depth to their love. Her energy and spontaneity challenged him to grow, to see beyond routine, and to embrace the beauty of unpredictability. He found that the calm moments, the mornings on the porch, quiet rides through the fields, evenings under the stars, were richer because they were shared with someone who made life exciting. Together, they learned to balance adventure and calm, to support each other, and to find joy in every situation. One winter morning, John and Sarah rode to the top of a hill overlooking the plains, the ground covered in a light blanket of snow. The world was quiet and still, except for the soft crunch of the horses' hooves. They stopped at the top, watching the sun rise over the horizon, casting a warm glow across the frozen landscape. Sarah laughed, her breath forming little clouds in the cold air. "Even the quiet days feel magical with you," she said. John smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. He realized that life was not just about adventure or calm. It was about the combination of both, the balance they had created together. Over time, John also learned to embrace unpredictability in smaller everyday ways. Sarah would wake him early for spontaneous rides, suggest exploring a new trail, or challenge him to try something he had never done before. At first, he had worried about keeping up, but now he found joy in letting go of control and trusting in her lead. Each small adventure, each burst of laughter, each shared challenge brought them closer together and strengthened the foundation of their love. John often reflected on the journey that had brought him to this life. He remembered the quiet cowboy he had once been, dreaming of a calm, predictable life. He thought of the first time he met Sarah, the county fair, and the laughter that had drawn him in. He thought of the wedding day, the wild ride home, and the countless adventures that had followed. And he realized that the life he now had was richer, fuller, and more beautiful than anything he had imagined. He had not lost his quiet moments. He had enhanced them, experienced them more deeply, and shared them with someone who made every day extraordinary. As John and Sarah rode together across the plains one evening, the sun setting behind distant hills, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had found a partner who challenged him, inspired him, and loved him fully. He had learned to embrace adventure, laughter, and unpredictability, while still cherishing calm, peace, and reflection. He understood now that life was not about choosing between excitement and tranquility. It was about blending them, sharing them, and building a life that was vibrant, meaningful, and unforgettable. And so John and Sarah continued their journey together, embracing each sunrise and sunset, every long ride and quiet moment, and the full spectrum of life's experiences. John had once dreamed of a quiet bride, a calm, gentle partner who would share in his simple life. What he found instead was far better, a woman who made every day an adventure, who challenged him to grow, and who taught him that love was about embracing both calm and wildness. With Sarah by his side, he discovered that life was not just something to live. It was something to ride, laugh, explore, and treasure every single day. Their love had become a perfect balance of wild and calm, laughter and quiet, adventure and reflection. Together, they built a life that was unforgettable, filled with moments of joy, challenges that strengthened their bond, and memories that would last a lifetime. John realized that dreams sometimes take unexpected forms, and that the life you imagine may only be the beginning. True happiness, he understood now, was found in embracing the unexpected, sharing every moment, and riding through life with someone who makes your heart race while keeping it steady. And in the end, John knew he had everything he had ever wanted, and more. He had found a bride who kept him riding until sunrise, who made every day exciting and meaningful, and who shared in a love that was as wild and free as it was calm and steady. Life with Sarah was not what he had imagined, but it was far better, richer, and more beautiful than any dream he had ever dared to dream.